in January 2019, my eldest daughter asked me very, very innocently what I did in work, what I do all day, and I dismissed her in a sort of, oh, it's boring. You don't want to sort of learn about that. And then, of course, regretted saying that pretty quickly afterwards, and thought about what I'd said and why was I telling my daughter that work is boring. I don't want her to think that. I don't want to think that what I do is not interesting to me, especially when occasionally you have to sacrifice time with your children for your work. So that's not a great message to share. So back then I started to think about, well, what would make me happy in what I do, and why would I be spending so much time each week performing something which I don't like to do? So that started the process of me trying to reevaluate my own life and my own career to work out where can I add more value. And ultimately, as you know, sort of ended up developing this sort of passion for actually, well, no, hang on, I like to think I've got quite a good skill set. Your introduction would certainly suggest I might have something to add value somewhere. So, it then become, okay, so why can't I apply that to a new environment and an area where I think I can really make a difference? And luckily for me, when I met Jane Hoffer, our CEO, she recognized that as well. And now I was able to jump from financial services technology right into clean technology, or in our current state into sort of mobility change, so that we can so I can sort of apply those skills, and it's working out really well. If you're a corporation and you have a responsibility or a belief that you want to lower your own carbon emissions, you have, of course, the carbon you put into the atmosphere through your own operations, through what you make or for what you do. But because you want to encourage your staff to come to you, in many cases, you want to come to the office, you're also encouraging them, in that instance, to put carbon into the atmosphere, unless they use a mode of transport which doesn't do that. So you also have a responsibility to, once you're trying to bring your people to your office or send them around the world or around the country, whatever you're doing, you're creating this problem. So what you should be looking at doing as well, rather than our carbon emissions is X, you need to think about all of the impact on your supply chain as well, because all of your supply chain will be emitting carbon, and your employees in their role come into the office or even in their personal life will be doing that as well. And organizations have quite a big responsibility, therefore, to change that culturally and to encourage their staff to behave in a different way. So I think, as a drip feed into society, those corporations are perfectly placed to change the way that we all behave. Well, I spoke to someone in Glasgow recently who was trying to work out how they would use electric power to fuel their refuse collection lorries that drive around the streets. And they calculated they had a real problem with this because it didn't have enough power to get up some of the hills in Edinburgh. No, Glasgow, it was in Glasgow. Didn't have enough power to get up the hills in Glasgow. And the suggestion they'd had to that point, we'll just turn them around so they go down the hill instead. So, of course, that's a bit of a silly explanation. But there's a complexity involved when you transition to electric vehicles, but not everything can be electric yet. So what you need to consider, as you pointed out, is that what can be electric, and when it can be electric, and what other modes of transport could be used to supplement that. And to be honest, today, if you looked at an entire fleet of vehicles, you'd still be recommending for some of them that it's a combustion engine, because actually the technology isn't there for some people yet and for what they need the car for or a van for. Another client I was speaking to last week and spoke something really interesting. They're an emergency response company. They're in the security space. It's not a health thing, but they respond to burglar alarms and things. And they were explaining how at the end of each working day, say it's 4 or 5 o'clock, if they've had an electric vehicle moving around different sites all day, it may be running out of charge. But then they get a call out, and that call out could be from Liverpool to Motherwell, the north reaches of the UK. If that happens, they've got to work out how, number one, how they're going to charge their vehicle to get there. But of course, they also have a sort of contractual response time that they've got to meet. So imagine that's 4 hours. They've got to get to Motherwell in 4 hours. You can fill up your van and you can do it in 4 hours normally. If you have to put an hour and a half charging, or 2 hours or 3 hours charging, it's not physically possible. So you can see that you can't just say to everyone, swap it for electric vehicle. There are use cases where you need to have a blend. You need to have a balance of different types of fuel to make the mobility problem, or not make it, to solve the mobility problem. Business to business, it's quite a rare thing to sort of share a passion and share ideas and work out how you work together. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, because you need to have complementary products that sort of support a wider ecosystem, but it's quite a rare thing. Well, shifting into the clean tech industry, as we're talking about today, or in particular in this electric vehicle transition phase that we're all in, is completely different. So there's a community, a very loving community, and I don't mean that in a particularly over the top way, but certainly I feel a lot of love, and I feel a lot of support in the community, where people want to help each other, people want to connect, largely because some of the answers aren't known yet, and we're trying to build an ecosystem and services and relationships and partnerships that help our clients ultimately. And people know they can't do that on their own. There's an expert in one vertical, there's an expert in another. They have to work together to make these things work. So you see, you're making some introductions. There are events that go on that are really strong in making those introductions as well. And what I'm seeing and what I'm really encouraged by is that the people who are involved in them, they're there to do business. They're there to meet people. They're there to look for these partnerships. It isn't a rarity. People are putting their hand up and saying, "Look, I need help. Who can I speak to? Who has this software? Who has this infrastructure?" So people want to do that because they know it's good for their own mission, but it's also good for their own business.